Beauty retailing, as I understand, particularly by the Indian salon fraternity, has been something that they have been dabbling with for a very, very long time. I come across so many salon owners who want to start their own beauty product line and want to see how successful they can be. Now, the objective of doing this session is to really understand why get into beauty retailing. Is there really a need to do beauty retailing just because, is it really an extension of salon business? So we have with us Mr. Ahuja, who's kind of seen the entire gamut of beauty retailing. They have done it very successfully in their own field. And so he's going to tell us and delve on two sides of beauty retailing, which is very pertinent. Why get into it? And once you've actually got into it, then how do you really do it very successfully? What is the mindset that you need? Probably a transitional mindset from a salon owner to a FMCG, I would say, or probably a beauty goods retailer. What does it really take, and what practices you would really need to do in order to get it right? So, Mr. Ahuja, if you can share your thoughts with us.
Thank you for having me over here today, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here at a session that I hope you will find useful. As a company, when VLCC started 23 years ago, we were essentially a services business. But if you were to fast forward to today, 50% of our revenues come out of the product side of the business, or the services side that is very closely linked to our own product side of the business. We felt we needed to invest in and address. And that was about 10 years ago when, as a services organization, we had reached a size which had achieved a certain stature and spread that justified sort of economies of scale to kick in, to be able to take in the manufacturing of consumables in-house. And the problem at that time was that, beyond a point in time, we realized that there was issues to do with standardization, there were issues to do with quality, there were issues to do with efficacy of the product that got manufactured. The product retail side of VLCC's business today, 6 years down the line from when it started, or 7 years down the line when it started, 30% of the retail business comes out of supplies to the professional segment. We don't necessarily as participants in this industry today have to get into the product side of the business because you are running the services side of the business. And that's an indication of how well and how quickly the industry has matured, because today you can with confidence access products that have the desired quality. You can access products across a large geographic footprint which are similar. Because of the fact that even manufacturers have caught up with the need.
Now, okay, if somebody was to come up with a differentiated line, what according to you is the line to be in? I mean, organic is certainly one which has got the fancy, I think, more for health concerns. But apart from that, we see spas particularly, very high-end spas, they're doing lines which are, to do with foot products or so on. Would you suggest a salon doing something like that? On those lines?
If you're running a successful services business, then that's your core, and that's your core competency. Why diffuse the focus by wanting to get into developing products? The biggest advantage of the wellness domain, and I think also it is its biggest disadvantage on the other end of the spectrum, is the fact that the entry barriers in this space are very low. For somebody to set up a services or salon business doesn't really take much today. But people do realize when they get into the business, and as you guys would, I'm sure, agree with me, is that till you don't get into the business, you don't realize how complex the business is, or how knowledge-based the business is, or how the business is sensitive when it comes to certain critical areas like manpower, as being discussed earlier today. And similarly, when you want to get into the product side of the business, till you don't get into it, and we've learned it at our cost, by the way, is that it is a highly knowledge-based business. You can't just develop products by picking up recipes off the net.
So I think Mr. Ahuja out here, he's got a right point that let's not just get into it for the heck of it, but I ask you that if somebody was to do it at a more strategic level, let's say develop a private label where somebody else would manufacture and you're just going to use your brand name to enhance your own brand in the product side, at least what should be your salon strength in terms of what scale you should have already achieved to be able to do that at all effectively, both within the in-salon retailing as well as in, let's say, the shelf retailing eventually?
If you want to do private labeling, today you have options available in India as well as globally, where even very modest quantities can be private labeled. So there is no set formula to my mind. But my point is that you need to get into private label only if you think that your brand as a services brand has acquired a certain equity which you can transfer to the product itself. I mean, imagine a standalone salon, and I'm not wanting to sort of disparage anybody, but imagine a standalone salon with no brand equity has its own products. It doesn't add to the customer's perception. At the end of the day today, people, why would companies like, let's say, L'Oreal or Henkel and so on adopt salons to put the branding? Because those products, branding's equity is bigger than the equity of the outlet itself. And for the outlet, it works because it helps generate footfalls and also transfers a certain equity to that particular outlet itself based on the brand that they have on the marquee outside.
Sure. But just to take the discussion forward, I mean, any particular, how would you ask a salon chain to strategize beauty retailing in salon? I mean, how do they really go about making sure that it's a pure revenue format and not just having shelves for the heck of it and, probably for making your salon look better? So what kind of strategies should salons actually put in to do some serious retailing revenues out of their, out of the stores or units, franchise units?
Well, increasingly, product sales is becoming an integral and crucial part of salon revenue management. American salon chains, typically, there are several salon chains in the US which work on the franchisee model, and when they advise you to take on a franchise, they always they give you a figure between 15 to 20% of revenues coming from products. So it's an increasingly important product. In India, it is also happening. So there are in VLCC, for example, product sales are relatively small in percentage terms, but that's also because VLCC's ticket size for average customer is very, very high because of the services that we do. We are a problem solution brand and not so much as a grooming brand. But if you were to take typically salons, I would be surprised if the product sales are less than 15 to 20%. And I think salons would do well to focus on product sales. Again, I say that because of the quality of the products now that have come into the market, and I'm very, very happy to see that. So salons can justifiably sell it to their customers with the confidence that the product that they give, by and large, if they are branded products, do live up to the promise that they make.
I know that for sure that grocery stores or large hyper stores, they have such huge sections which are personal grooming product sections, and I often find that any company would put in one of their own salesperson out there in order to show that they're getting the right revenue from the store. And so it basically works like as many stores into, let's say, a model like New You would do that. Would you suggest something similar for a salon if they can do it maybe with one company or two? At least they would be able to drive the sales, right? Because the way I look at salons retailing is that it's nobody's cup of tea. If it happens, it's well and good. If it doesn't happen, there's no heart loss in it. So until that heart loss is actually built into it, but maybe, a separate person, or probably, let's say, a company like Henkel or L'Oreal would actually put in one person with a large salon product category put over there. To retail. Do you think something like that would work? Have you seen any international example of it?
Yeah, sure. Indian manufacturers, global manufacturers are increasingly doing that. So is VLCC, for example. We have a professional line We have, if there are salons that agree to stock and sell VLCC products on an exclusivity basis, they are given all those kind of benefits, like, you know, help to sell, training, beauty advisor, depending on the size and scale of the outlet. But at the end of the day, I also want to emphasize that if you're a services offering, products are a important part of it, which are cream off the top. But the services business itself is obviously your core area. But where products come into play is in terms of how well you integrate the services with the aftercare product line. And that's how most companies globally have developed their lines. And that's how most companies who got in from the products business into the services business and vice versa have successfully managed that transition. Which is, for example, if somebody is coming to you for, let's say, an anti-acne treatment in your salon, then as part of that treatment, if you give home care products, that A, adds to your revenues, B, it also adds to a more efficacious treatment for your customer.
Already spas and salons have seen their services getting integrated. A lot of day spas are probably giving a lot of salon services in-house too. Do you see that there is a possibility of probably Dr. A's being able to sell out their services of a salon? One, what I would call a more cross-pollination or a revenue building model. And secondly, if at all something like that can be done, then how do you make sure, as I said, it's otherwise, you know, signing a contract is far easier than actually living up to it and making sure that everybody is making money out of it. So how does one make sure that, you know, some traction is built for the customer to actually purchase a Dr. A's service from a salon he's regularly visiting in? Do you think some product lines of, let's say, Dr. A's, if in case they have it, or somebody else who would have it, would help? Or again, as I said, you know, do you need a separate person to go out there and to be able to sell out a service and make sense out of it?
You know, not giving the customer what we think he wants, but there was one of the speakers came up with, you know, understanding your customer and offering the customer what he needs. So it's a question of choice there. It depends from outlet to outlet what kind of customers frequent you. But increasingly, in terms of a trend, what is happening is, I can share with you, is that, you know, most full-scale salons are now moving up the value chain. And that value chain is in terms of, you know, from pure play grooming services to high-end skincare services to even dermal cosmetology offerings like, you know, Botox and fillers and peels and so on. So that's all part of how an industry matures. It also is on how an individual entrepreneur sees his customer base capable of you know, taking those services. So it depends on A, where you're located, the catchment area, your own mindset, your customer's mindset. But yes, increasingly what brands are finding, and brands like us, for example, are finding that it is possible to stretch the offering within the same sort of brand equity. From, you know, take our own example, from being a slimming services company to you know, a slimming and beauty services company to a slimming beauty fitness services, and now in the wellness domain, where, you know, in only about 40% of our revenues come out of the pure play slimming offering. Sure. But I don't think that can necessarily happen overnight. It is a gradual process, and you have to be careful in terms of doing whatever you do in terms of diversification, being not at the cost of your existing sort of core revenue stream.
Does VLCC do, let's say, slimming products also? I mean, as your product line, I mean, some nutrients which will help you probably lose weight. So which, you know, from the way I look at it, makes a lot of sense, because if I believe in you, I believe in your stores to help me slim, probably I would equally believe in your products to help me slim.
Yeah, in fact, that for us was the lowest hanging fruit when we got into the products business, was because there were these topical application products like anti-cellulite oils and gels, which we were using in-house for our treatments and therapies for body shaping and slimming. Those were the first products that we got into when we started manufacturing. Today, it's a fairly large brand. In fact, it's the largest, it's the category leader. It's something called Shape Up.